You're listening to the #1 podcast for nonprofit leaders, getting your nonprofit fully funded. This is the Fundraising Masterminds Podcast. Hook them in with some kind of really good event that they would want to go to.
Right.
Use that as an opportunity to build relationships, do the appeal, do a presentation.
Then you get them to invite their friends to come to an event, and you start the process with their friends.
This is not complicated, right? This is a fairly simple...
Just building friendship.
Well, hey there. Welcome to another episode of the Fundraising Masterminds Podcast. We are so excited to see you and have you join with us today. I'm your host, Jason Galasinski, and with me, my co-host, Jim Dempsey.
Hi, Jason.
And together we have over 60 years of development experience working with thousands of nonprofits all over the world. We are so excited that you're here. You know, if you are a nonprofit leader, executive director, development director, or involved in nonprofit leadership, then this podcast is for you. And today is no exception. We've got a great topic lined up for you today. And today is no exception. We've got a great topic lined up for you. We're going to be talking about major donors today.
Yes. Yeah, this seems to be one of our hottest topics always, Jason. People tend to flock to our videos when we talk about major donors.
So today we're going to give you 4 steps of what you can do right now to kickstart your major donor program.
Right, absolutely.
And they're very simple things. They're not; these aren't complicated things. Okay.
Right.
So the main goal is we want to be focused on building relationships. So we need to get into a relational mindset here.
Right. Absolutely.
Right? What can we do to build, foster relationships? So if you think about back in your young days before you were married, and you were probably thinking along the lines of, wow, someday I'm going to get married, and who am I going to marry, and how am I going to find this person?
Yeah.
And, you know, there's things that you do to cultivate relationships, to get to know people, right? You don't just start a program and say, well, the Jim Dempsey dating program has begun.
And I'm going to be done with this by this date. I'm going to have a spouse chosen by this date. Yeah.
And I'm going to date 10 girls a week until I find my perfect whatever, like you can't just go into it systematically.
Yeah,
you know?
there needs to be some intentionality, but yes, you can't just put just run it through a process.
Right. So that's what we're trying to get at here.
Right.
Is these steps are relational steps, relationship building steps.
Yeah.
And really, if you've been listening to our podcast for any length of time, you know that we're all about fundraising and not fundraising. In fact, we did a whole podcast episode on the differences between fundraising and fundraising. Right. So we're not trying to just get dollars. We're not trying to treat them like ATMs. Right.
That's right.
We want them to be
long-term
partners and long-term friends. Yeah. So Jim, why don't we get into these 4 things?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the first thing is really finding a hook and engaging with people. We need to find out what are some things that they have an interest in. When you and I were talking about this particular episode, I started sharing with you one activity or event that really surprisingly, and I say that in that it kind of surprised us, that has really been a game changer for us. And within the major donor effort, within the campus ministry of Crew, one event really made a big difference, and that was a dove hunt. Now, I know right now we may be setting up a few red flags with some people that, I hate to talk about hunting or killing animals or something like that. And I
put that thought on hold for a bit.
I kind of start by apologizing in the sense that, this is a particular activity that happened to resonate really well with people. Jason, we came across an individual in Houston, Texas, who over a number of years has become a very, very dear friend of our organization. And at one point he said to us, I own a ranch, and a typical weekend at that ranch for people who come in and hunt is about $10,000 in a weekend. Wow. But I'm going to offer that to you free of charge to any individuals who you want to bring there who are prospective donors to the organization.
Wow. That's a pretty big deal.
It is a really big deal. And the individuals who we started inviting knew it was a big deal. We provided them an opportunity to be able to do a trip of a lifetime, essentially.
Yeah.
And those people saw that, hey, I get to go with a friend of mine, essentially, who we had begun to start at least some relationships with some people. So we saw the opportunity that we could invite these people. They would have a good time. And at the end of the day, we'd have an opportunity to kind of sit around and talk a little bit about what we did. Well, it really surpassed our expectations. We weren't sure exactly what to expect with some of these. But when you spend a day with an individual, riding in Jeeps all over West Texas, and just essentially in sport with someone and roughing it, it's a neat experience. And at the end of the day, we would sit around in the cabin in the lodge and have a fireplace and just start to talk about things. We'd talk about life. We'd talk about challenges they were facing in their life. And then we would shift over to the mission of our organization. And we would, in a very warm and friendly atmosphere, we get to talk about what we do and how we do it.
Sounds really nice, actually. Can I go on one of those trips?
You sure can, absolutely. But it really opened the door. And what that said to me, Jason, it isn't that particular event or opportunity that made the difference, although it certainly helped. But we have found a wide variety of activities like that. Other hunting opportunities. We do a few pheasant hunt episodes, but we also do a golf outing. We do a wide variety of things.
The take the principle of what we're saying, don't copy it.
Not the actual activity, right?
Right. So the main thing is that the activity was something that was valued at something that a major donor would appreciate. Right. So it wasn't like a trinket thing.
That's right.
But it was like, oh wow, this is a really good deal.
Yeah.
If your major donors like golfing and you can get a really nice, reputable VIP golf course to give you a weekend tournament or something free of charge or something like that, right?
Right.
To where people would actually want to fly across the country or take some time out of their busy schedule to go to.
Right. Absolutely. Well, and some of those who are in our audience are listening saying, well, this tends to be a male-heavy activity. We've done the same thing with our ladies. There's a resort in Tennessee called Blackberry, which is a very prominent resort. And I had no idea until some of our ladies said, hey, can we do an event at Blackberry? I find that Ellen DeGeneres, Oprah Winfrey, these are the kinds of places that they like to go to. The Blackberry Resort is a lavish resort from the standpoint that it's a rustic setting, but they treat their people well. Like you go on a hike and they've got stations where you build s'mores and you have and they're doing these things for you and just providing great treatment for people. And once again, we found a partner, a major donor, who are willing to help us offset the cost of a weekend for our ladies. We did the exact same thing in New York City at Christmas time. Christmas time is a busy and a joyous time in New York City. The lights, the billboards, Broadway. We did an event there at Tavern on the Green. Took individuals to the Waldorf Astoria. Once again, what we're saying is pulling people to a hook event that will get them connected.
Right. So the main principle here is that we want to hook them in with some kind of
things that are appealing and attracting to them.
Yeah. And then while they're there, we're not gonna just ask them for money.
No.
We're using this as an opportunity to build a relationship with them.
That's right.
To get to know them, to pray for them, to find out what they care about. And that's really kind of the next point that we want to get to is find out where their heart is, find out what their passion is. That's really the next step in building a major donor program. So the first one is hooking them in with a nice event, getting people together so you can connect.
Feel comfortable with us and our organization.
The second thing is that you want to find out what their passions are, what they care about.
And we've talked about this a number of times on our broadcast, is that you want to find out what interests them. And it may start with things like, what are your personal interests? But then when it gets to the bottom line, what makes you weep and pound the table? What are the things that you're passionate about? And I always say, Jason, you want to try and find that intersection between what they're passionate about and where your organization's mission is. And hopefully you will find an intersection there where you can say, this is where I want to pinpoint this, because this may be where we together can accomplish a goal.
But you're really not necessarily doing that at the event.
Oh, no.
The event
This could
is
be
just a get to know you kind of thing.
Yeah, you said it well, but I want to make sure our audience understands this. This is something that happens over time.
Yeah.
It's, I've used this analogy before as well. You didn't ask your wife, I didn't ask my wife to marry us on our first date. And it's exactly the same way. It took a period of courtship before we actually asked our spouses to marry us. It's exactly the same way. And unfortunately, I came out of the old school so much in development. And I was taught initially, strike while the iron's hot, take advantage of that opportunity. And those things may still exist out there. I may try for 6 months to get an appointment with someone. And I feel like if I don't ask on that appointment, I may not get another appointment. And those do happen, but they're getting more and more rare. You want to look at what can we do over time to build a relationship with people. So you may have 2, 3, 4 meetings with someone to understand where is that connection with them before you actually ask.
Yeah, and that's kind of leading into our third point, which is getting an appointment with them, where you're meeting with them and communicating more one-on-one.
Right.
This, of course, is happening, maybe days or weeks after the event.
Or months. Yeah, right.
So,
exactly.
So think of this as a long-term thing, right, where you're first inviting them to an event, you're learning about who they are, you're following up with some thank you notes or maybe some phone calls, right? And you're trying to find ways to connect on more of a personal level.
That's right.
Right. So the next step is you ultimately want to get to a point where you can make a presentation.
Right.
Right. And that's our next step is present a case for support.
Yes.
But you can't just say, hey, Bobby, thanks for coming this weekend to this thing. Are you available tomorrow so I can come in and give you a presentation?
Right.
Unless they're really ready for it.
Yeah.
Most people, I think, you got to warm them up to this idea and, help them get to know you and build that trust. But eventually you want to get, like you talk a lot about with major donors specifically,
right?
You want to get face to face,
right?
With
exactly.
them.
Yeah. Well, again, using our marriage analogy, which I use quite often, is that I know for a fact Diane would not have married me if I asked her on the first date. I would venture to say Jennifer probably was the same way. A lot of our partners, it does take time and courtship to get to that point.
Well, and you probably wouldn't marry your spouse if you didn't spend a lot of face-to-face time
with them.
I mean, just you can't marry a person over letter writing.
That's right.
You can't marry a person over a phone call.
That's right.
You do have to make an effort to get face-to-face.
Yeah. And Jason, you asked me in the course of this discussion beforehand, you said, how do you develop a relationship with people outside your local area, major donors? And I had explained to you that a lot of our guys do take the time to get in a plane and go visit somebody. They do fly from Boston to Houston or from Boston to Chicago or from
You just got to do what it takes.
You do, yeah. And is that going to...
That shows the person that, wow, if this person got on a plane and to come and visit me, that means they really value me.
They value the relationship, and they care. Well, and you may say, oh, well, that's going to cost me $400. Well, what if you've got an opportunity to get $25,000? Would you invest $400 to get $25,000? Yeah, and it's never certain that you're going to get money from someone when you go to meet them.
Yeah,
but your odds greatly increase. Yeah. I can tell you that very rarely do you get money from someone when you don't ask them for that. The great philosopher Wayne Gretzky once said that you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Yeah. And that is by not getting in that plane and going to meet those people. Right. You're missing that opportunity.
All right. Well, the fourth step seems obvious to me, but after you've made a case for support on that one-on-one appointment.
Right.
And by the way, I'd like to say that if you're kind of wondering, well, wait, tell me about that one-on-one appointment. Like, how do you actually do that, right? How does that work? What do you say? How do you put together a case for support?
Yeah.
Well, if you want to learn more about all that stuff, we've actually put together a full-scale online course called Major Donor Mastery. This is really taking everything we know about major donors, how to develop a major donor plan, what to do with how to find major donors, how to book appointments, what to say at an appointment. Like, it's like really detailed stuff.
Right.
And we've packed all this into a course called Major Donor Mastery. You can scan the QR code on the screen and check it out. But I would recommend that. There's like hours and hours and hours of footage in this course. So we don't have time to go into it in this program. Yeah. So, really the case for support involves the whole like meeting face to face, making the presentation and asking for support.
Right.
So once we finish the case for support, we really want to get into follow up, and that's really our fourth thing that we can do in our major donor program is following up with them after the case for support.
Yeah. Well, Jason, if you have done your job right, and of course, you mentioned that doing it right is in the major donor mastery.
Yeah.
But if you've done your job right, you're going to challenge someone to something big. Mm-hmm. Most of the time, if you do challenge someone right, they're going to say, Jim, I need to think about this a little bit. I need to process through, need to talk to my accountant, need to talk to my wife, whatever, your spouse.
You always say if they write you a check on the spot, that you've
asked them for too little. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah, and so you'll follow up with them and find out what have they decided. Mm-hmm. And you can work through all the details. In this day and age, there's a lot of details involved in those things. A lot of times it's how will the money be funneled to us? Do they need to sell some stock or donate some stock to us to be able to do this? But that is what needs to happen. Yeah. And you need to have that discussion with them.
You always say most major donors have like 90 or maybe 95% of their wealth in assets.
Assets, right.
So if you challenge them right, and they think, okay, how do I make this happen?
Right.
They're thinking not in terms of how do I get, dollar signs out of my bank account. They're thinking more along the lines of, okay, what things do I need to move around? What things do I need to shift? What could I sell? I do have this thing over here. I don't really use that very often. Maybe I could get rid of that and that'll pay for this, or, so that's what they're thinking about. And they need time to sort that through.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and in fact, without sounding crass, if we are getting a gift out of their liquid assets, we probably have asked for too little as well, too. So if we make a significant gift and ask them to make a real investment, they're going to have to tap into those assets. And we can even show them ways to do that and to be involved. Now, again, follow-up also includes, after they've said yes, sending a thank you, and helping to follow up and follow through with reports to them. If I made an investment, if I bought some stock, I want to find out what was the return on investment with that stock. How did it do over the last 6 months? How did it do over the last year? Exactly the same thing with our partners. They want to know how was my money used and what kind of a return on investment. What was the outcome of that? Yeah. So that's also part of our follow-up process.
Right, yeah. Makes sense. And that's really the 4 things that you can do to kickstart a major donor program, right?
Right, exactly.
We've kind of got like jokingly a 5th point, which is just repeat,
Right. Well, Jason, if you followed this, if you're our audience and you've been following and tracking with us, you'll notice there's somewhat of a cycle with this. So you're starting with hooking them, then getting to know them, and then you're talking about putting a case for support, challenging them, following up, and you finish the cycle with them giving a gift to you. Well, I always like to say this is similar to rinse and repeat, because then you get them to invite their friends to come to an event, and you start the process with their friends. We have a lot of the people who have come to this Dove event, the Dove Hunt event that I mentioned. These individuals, this has really impacted their lives. Many of them said it's one of the most impactful weekends they've ever had because we do go deep with them. We find out where their heart is. And they want to invite their friends. The invitation is kind of like, Joe, I went to this weekend, this dove hunting weekend with crew, and I'm going back again this year. I'd like for you to come with me. I know you like hunting as well too.
Yeah.
And it allows us to get to meet their friends.
When you do something you enjoy, what's the first thing you want to do? You want to bring your friends.
Bring your friends, yeah. Right. You got a restaurant that you like to go to, you invite another couple to go with you. Yeah. And that's what this is. And so really what happens is it starts a cycle where we do invite new people ourselves, but after a while, once the momentum starts to go and the ball gets to start rotating, individuals will invite their friends for us, which really helps.
Yeah, and I hope that as you're listening to this, you can see this is not complicated, right? This is a fairly simple.
It's building a friendship. It's just building friendship.
Building a friendship. Yeah. So we've got hook them in with some kind of really good event that they would want to go to.
Right.
Use that as an opportunity to build relationships. Follow up with some phone calls and letters and thank you notes, and try to get to the point where you can get face to face with that person. Do the appeal, do a presentation. We call it the case for support, and then just follow up with them.
Right.
And then invite them and their friends to the next event.
Right. And start the process over with new friends.
Yeah. And that's maybe happening over the course of a year, right? Or 6 months or
honestly, we're building long-term relationships. So it could take longer than that.
But how often do you do a major donor event?
We do probably 3 to 5 major donor events a year.
Right. And but you don't invite the same people to all 5, do you?
Not necessarily. Yeah, they pick and choose. Right. Okay. Exactly. And of course, it's based on interest. Now, in one of our other videos, we talked about a major donor weekend where we actually use the whole weekend to present who our organization is. The dove hunt is one of the best springboards to get people to that event. If they like this, we start to hype up our weekend where Joe, it's a different kind of event. We're not hunting at this event, but I think it would allow you, if you like the little bit of information we gave you about crew, we're going to tell you more in a greater way.
Well, and just for our audience to know, the Major Donor Weekend is a full-on presentation weekend where you bring people in. It's a very intentional program.
Friday to Sunday, and we're unpacking all the key elements, everything from giving a Friday evening to talk about the problem, then unpack our strategies and plans in the morning, talk forward thinking.
The point is that it's like an investor weekend. It's way different than a dove hunt.
Right.
But you are still focused on building relationships.
You are, even at that, and in fact, really, that even goes deeper in a lot of ways. But this all comes down to, if you, it'd be similar to if you moved into a new community, you started a new church, you'd want to build friends in that church community, and it's the same kind of way. You're just trying to be genuine with people. When you move into that community in that church, you're starting genuine relationships. You need to look at genuine relationships as opposed to manipulated relationships, or I only want to get to know this person to get into their pocket. Our investors, our partners, they can sniff that out in a heartbeat that our intentions are not genuine. So go genuine with those people.
Right. Well, there you have it. There's 4 steps you can do right now to kickstart your major donor program. And again, if this is something where you're like, wow, this is really great, I understand, but I want to go deeper. And believe me, there's a lot more that you could be doing. We just gave you the framework of getting started,
kind
in
of
a sense.
Cliff Note version in a sense.
But yeah, there's a lot more things and a lot more specifics of how do you do this actually? How do you put together a major donor weekend, or how do you put together a presentation for a major donor? How do you book a phone call? What do you say? What should you be doing when you go into that appointment?
How do you address their concerns?
How do you address their concerns, and how do you do follow up? And we have a specific communication guide in the program that we call 333 Skip, and we talk through that, implementing that, building a team of people around your major donors. And so there's a lot of things that are involved in the major donor that's beyond the scope of this episode. But if you are interested in learning about that, you can learn about that through our Major Donor Mastery course. And so scan the QR code, click the link in the description, and check it out because it might help you a lot. And Jim, I know, the ministry that you work for is a worldwide organization. It's a large organization, but you probably get most of your giving comes through major donors, right?
Oh, without question.
So imagine, trying to run, Campus Crusade for Christ without major donors.
Oh, I couldn't even.
It would be really hard.
I couldn't even imagine. Yeah.
So is it worth the investment to learn how to implement a major donor strategy? Yes,
it is.
Because it's going to return 10-fold, 20-fold in return in the long run. And so it's the main thing that's going to move your ministry up a notch. So I definitely recommend that you take a look at the Major Donor Mastery class. And while you're out there checking us out, if you wouldn't mind subscribing to this podcast, we release weekly episodes for nonprofit leaders, development directors, executive directors, anyone who's involved in leadership with nonprofits. This is the podcast for you. We talk about stuff like this all the time, major donors, strategy, fundraising tips, fundraising events, how to raise capital. We just recently did an episode on a capital campaign. So there's all kinds of stuff that we talk about nonprofits. We like to say this podcast is about all things nonprofit, right? Where we're really focused in on the fundraising side of things, building relationships, which we call development.
Right.
And we're not really trying to treat people like ATMs. We don't want to just get in their pocketbook. We want to focus on long-term relationships. So if that's something you're interested in, subscribe to this channel. And Jim, any last final words that you want to say about kickstarting a major donor program?
Well, I just always have to come back to it's about relationships and make sure that you are going in this with a genuine heart, genuine intention to start a friendship with people. And it will snowball. As you get to know one, you'll get to know others and more. And that actually will be the program in a way. It creates itself. Like you said, there are certain steps we have to take, but you'd be surprised how the program will build momentum and, in a sense, start itself.
Yeah, that's really good. Well, thank you again for joining us on today's episode of the Fundraising Masterminds Podcast. We will see you again next time.
Take care.